Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast, a podcast that covers everything Cage Warriors, anytime there's a card, or pretty much anytime something happens. And speaking of cards, boy, did we have a good card this past week. It was Cage Warriors 151 or Unplugged. So if anyone who listens to this isn't familiar with Cage Warriors, they have this little series that they do called Unplugged, where they have cards at the BT Sports Studio. And these are showcase cards. Usually, sometimes there's a title fight, sometimes there isn't. And it's, an opportunity to bleed through a bunch of fighters that haven't fought for the organization before. And the results this time around were immense, both from a title fight perspective and from a prospect perspective. So I'm really, really excited to be able to sit down and record this pod. And I think we might as well just get the hell into it right off the bat. So, I mean, there's so many ways I could tackle this card, guys. But for me personally, I want to go, like I always do, but really the emphasis this time around, this is the only way to go, is to start with that title fight between Will Curry and Mick Stanton. So, man, I'm still at a loss for words. I've watched the fight 3 times. I'm recording this on Wednesday night, and the fight happened last Friday. I've watched it 3 times. It's absolutely unbelievable how good that fight was, because it's so weird. It wasn't like anything insane happened by way of a knockout or by way of the pendulum swinging so much in like this slobber knocker or this insane striking bout. It really wasn't. It was primarily grappling. It was sloppy sometimes. It was high octane the other. There were great defensive sequences from both fighters, great offensive sequences from both fighters. It absolutely blew my mind. And, it's hard to contextualize how to feel about that fight, because going into it, and I tweeted about this and I'd spoken about this as well, I really didn't want to see either guy lose, because for Will Curry, immense amount of talent, clearly a very, very good 185er, strong, big, could probably do 205 later in his career. He's young, extremely gifted, a good striker, a good grappler. And for Mick Stanton on the other side, I hate to keep saying this in every podcast, but if you know me, I love a veteran fighter. I love these hard-nosed vets. I like these grinders, these guys that will just go in, get the job done by any means necessary, and will just ruin any matchmaker's plans of building a young fighter's names off their back, right? And Mick Stanton's made a career off of doing that at 10-7 going into this fight. Obviously, we'll talk about the results shortly, but at 10-7, he's probably someone that most folks would turn their nose up at, who would look at him and maybe he's a jobber, maybe he's this old veteran, and no one really knows who he is. Like, no, like if you know UK MMA, Mick Stanton is a fucking G, and what he did on Friday night as a sizable underdog. I didn't look at the betting lines. I'm not really, looking at stuff like that with MMA. I always say that, but if you're listening to this pod for like betting tips or anything like that, you're not going to get that here. But I looked at Mick Stanton and I was like, this guy's a massive underdog. He's got to be, right? Again, didn't look at the betting lines, but I imagine he was a pretty sizable underdog on the night. And I had a feeling. I had a feeling that Mick Stanton was going to find a way to break Will Curry. And I think what's interesting about this fight is we all thought it would go the same way. If it finishes in the first 2 rounds, it's Will Curry. If it finishes in the latter rounds, it's Mick Stanton. We expected either Curry to break Stanton or Stanton to break Curry. And, I just mentioned about breaking Will Curry down. I don't think Stanton broke Will Curry so much as Stanton just had a competitive fight with this really, really young fighter and won. I don't think Curry was broken, because in that 5th round, I mean, he gives it his all. And in that 5th round, Curry has an argument for almost finishing that fight when he's raining down those ground and pound strikes on Mick Stanton, and the referee's starting to get a bit shaky and a bit hesitant and possibly going in to stop the fight. If you haven't watched the fight and you're listening to me, number one, I mean, why? But secondly, please go and watch the fight between Will Curry and Mick Stanton, because it was absolutely brilliant. And let's go into more detail. So going into the fight, Curry had a 4-fight win streak. His only 2 losses have been to Christian Leroy Duncan, which one of them was a contentious finish, which I personally didn't think was contentious. And then you had the second fight where, Duncan decisively wins a decision 29-28. But we hadn't really seen Curry tested too much outside of this. I mean, he's on his current winning streak. He'd won 3 fights by first round finish. Went to a decision with Kanisauskas, who is also on this card. We'll talk about him later. We definitely will. But it was a deserved title shot for Curry. Obviously, it came at the expense of Christian Leroy Duncan joining the UFC, which we always like to see. It was a deserved title shot. No one else was going to get it. He's the freshest and the most exciting fighter at 185 in Cage Warriors' roster. And Mick Stanton also deserved a title shot. I mean, for me, I always say it, Stanton's a proper veteran, 2-time title challenger, including this one, 36 years old. When he beat Darren Stewart, and that's the fight that I wanted to talk about, like him beating Darren Stewart, that for me was like, just put him in, just give him a title shot. I don't care. Like, even if Duncan was still with the organization, I wanted Stanton to get the next shot. I didn't really care about anything. I know some people might have looked at this as Curry getting a layup and getting like an old body for him to knock out, and it could have gone that way, right? Like, father time catches up to people and age catches up to people, but when Stanton just drained the hell out of Darren Stewart and just fucking dominated him on the ground, I just thought, this is it. Like, give him the title shot. I don't really care what happens. And I'm glad he got it. His previous crack at gold was in 2018 against Jonas Bilstein. I love this type of fighter, but let's just go into it. You've got Bukauskas in the corner of Will Curry. I love this duo at the moment. You saw all the work that Curry did for Bukauskas as a massive hype man in the corner in the UFC card in Perth when Bukauskas returned to the UFC. And then you also had it in reverse here. I think Bukauskas and his dad did a great job, coaching Curry through the rounds during the fight. So let's talk about the fight. Enough dilly-dallying and giving context. So round 1 commences. Stanton gets the first takedown of the night. Curry gets back to his feet fairly quickly, but at that moment you knew this is what Stanton's going to do. He's going to try and grapple, and Curry's going to have to find a way to defend that and, return some fire of his own, right? So there's a moment there where Curry manages to throw Stanton, dominates him for over half the round on top, not much by way of striking or submission attempts, but Stanton was getting smothered in that first round. I think he did a good job of defending some of the grappling threats, but, spending the majority of the round on your back is never good, and it was an easy round to score for Curry, in my opinion. And we will talk about scorecards later because definitely scorecards need to be discussed with this one. So round 2, a lot more dominance from Curry, a lot of top control, but again, no real like sub attempts or strikes. Stanton reverses position really, really well halfway through the round, threatens the Americana, which was a really cool moment, and then dominated the second portion of the round in side control and north-south position. It was kind of, all up to your interpretation of the scorecards. I think the fight definitely, where you land on the scorecards is how you score that second round, right? I think all the other rounds are pretty clear to score. I think the second round is honestly a 50-50. I've watched the fight 3 times. I score it the same way every 3 times. So we'll get into that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So third round, Stanton clipped Curry early in the third round, but got taken down. And this is when it just becomes a dogfight, right? Like Stanton's getting the Kimura in. It's the biggest moment of the fight. Like, my heart was in my freaking mouth at that point. Like, he did so well to reverse Curry's dominant positions, and then when he got that Kimura in, I was just losing my mind. It was textbook Mick Stanton. Argument there for a 10-8 round in round 3. There was a lot of good moments for Stanton, a lot of dominance. Curry basically did nothing, and at this point, I thought Curry was broken. So argument there for 10-8. Did I score it a 10-8? No, I still don't. All the times that I've watched it, I think while Stanton dominated a lot, there wasn't many moments where the fight looked like it was going to get finished, and there wasn't much by way of damage or anything really threatening or significant. There were little moments, but not enough of a discrepancy that it would warrant a 10-8 round, in my opinion. But I can definitely see the argument, and I don't disagree with people who scored it that way. So we go into round 4. I personally thought Curry was broken. I thought Stanton had him, and I thought the finish was imminent. But round 4, Curry still looked in it. Attempted to take the back and win the grappling positions, but Stanton was reversing absolutely everything, and it was just insane. Just using his back to reverse position after position. It's always risky when you give another professional fighter your back, but he baited Curry every single time to reverse those positions. It was insane to watch. Definitely Stanton's round in round 4, and we were seriously in dogfight territory at this point, and just so I don't forget, because I think at this point is when it really started to hit all of us. Strauss and Wharton on commentary, fucking unbelievable, right? Not to use the man's slogan, but it was insane how good those two were. And I spoke about it on the last episode of the pod. Brad Wharton does an amazing job of just letting Strauss do his thing. When people are grappling, he just lets Strauss take the shine and do his thing. But there's such a good balance, because when we do get to moments where the fight is threatening to be finished, Wharton steps in, adds to the drama of it all. And I think Strauss he was like a kid in a candy store in this fight. The commentary, the amount of do you know what? I'm just gonna say it. You don't really get this level of analysis in most MMA cards. When the fight hits the ground, you get a few little things here, but then people go back to quipping and making jokes in the commentary box. And if you watch enough MMA, you know what analysts I'm referring to. But with Strauss, I've rarely seen someone analyze a fight so well while also being insanely excited about it. The drama of it all, the stakes of this fight, just the energy from the commentary booth, it was nuts. And I loved it so much, and it amplified. It made this fight, like if you closed your eyes, you'd think these guys were standing and banging for 25 minutes. But they weren't. And I think what Strauss and Wharton did was they gave a fight that's predominantly grappling the credit and the respect it deserves, right? Like not every grappling fight, not every fight that descends into grappling or wrestling is boring. And this is one of those fights that I'm gonna always use as an example of a great grappling fight. Though it is sloppy, of course, but there's also some amazing little moments, little technical moments, especially from Stanton. But let's get back to that 5th round. So 5th round, Stanton starts really well, continuously sweeping, controlling Curry's arm. It was just an immense chess match on the ground. Curry showed heart though, man. Like I said, I thought Curry was out, but still showed that he was in the fight. In that 5th round, reverses position and starts beating on Stanton's head. And I thought, this fight is about to get stopped. Somehow Stanton survived. Somehow he got out of those bad positions. Ref almost stepped in after some elbows, it has to be said. But towards the end of the fight, Stanton reversed position. Massive roar from the crowd. I mean, I write notes while I watch all of these fights, and at some point I just forgot to write notes. Like I was just so engrossed. I think after round 3, I just wasn't writing anything anymore. But then I came back and just wrote a note where I was like 48-47 Curry ? Who the fuck knows and who the fuck cares? That's exactly what I wrote, and that was my scorecard, guys. I did personally think that Will Curry had done enough to win the fight. I did think that Will Curry won the fight, but I'm so happy for Mick Stanton, who, in my opinion, also deserved to win. It was a super close fight. If you think Curry won, great. If you scored it a draw because of the 10-8, you managed to do some mathematical gymnastics there, fine. I think the fair result is either Curry or Stanton. It's a real shame someone had to lose, but I thought Curry won, but I'm just so delighted for Stanton. Beware of an old man in a sport where men die young. I think that that quote gets used a lot in MMA, but I think for Mick Stanton that definitely fits. So that was my kind of scattered thoughts on the main event. I'm definitely at some point I want to write about this fight. I think we're going to be talking about this fight at the end of the year when we're looking at the awards show, and we're just looking back at what was 2023 for Cage Warriors. I think we're definitely going to be talking about this fight, but there was a few great moments on this card in general that we're definitely going to be talking about. So let's move along. Let's go co-main down. So the next fight was Steve Aimable versus Albert Diaz. So an interesting fight. Aimable's incapable of being in a boring fight. If you know Steve Aimable, that's exactly how it is. Always in scraps. Last time out, lost to Harry Hardwick, who's a guy who should be fighting for the belt very soon. Every time Amable's lost a fight in his career, he's almost always gone on a nice little streak. So, I was thinking that probably Amable's going to get something here. Albert Diaz, 5-3, hadn't fought for the last 3 years. A bit of a running theme on this card. Last fight was a split decision win in Bellator. Was supposed to fight Shahier last year, but the fight was cancelled due to Albert Diaz missing weight. So this wasn't an incredibly exciting fight, unfortunately. Like with Steve Amable, you expect these bangers, and the man's human. He's not always going to be in these insane high octane scraps. Slow first round. Diaz didn't look too bad. Amable was finding his range. He looked all right. Nice calf kicks, jabs, straights. Diaz did a really good job in the second round, though, of returning those leg kicks to Amable. There is a point where Amable gets dropped in the second round from an eye poke, as in, not gets dropped, sorry. He gets poked in the eyes and then obviously falls. It was a really bad eye poke, and perhaps it impacted Amable's fight from that point onwards. Diaz had a really nice head kick in the third round on Amable, started to dominate in that third. The output was mainly the kicks from him, a lot of push kicks to the body, a lot of teeps, a lot of leg kicks, kicks to the body, kicks to the head. He was scoring, and Amable looked a bit frozen, not his usual self. Definitely a fight he probably already regrets, and one that he's watched back and just is kicking himself for it. Albert Diaz, I scored it 29-28. I thought it was a fair result. Crazy for a guy to perform like that after 3 years of inactivity, but we got someone else on this card who was out for a bit longer and performed to a much more insane level. So let's keep moving down this card. Before co-main and main event territory, we then landed on Agi Sardari versus Samuel Jan Blasco, who I'll name Jan Blasco for the rest of this section of the pod, because that's what he goes by. Agi Sardari, obviously the former Cage Warriors champion at 155, just a superb fighter, one of the best in Cage Warriors, doesn't often get his flowers in my opinion, definitely one of my favorites. His last appearance in the organization against the now UFC fighter Mike Figlak. Obviously, he lost that fight, kind of got the brakes beaten off him a little bit in that one. But Sardari's a guy I've got so much respect for and a guy I love watching. Jan Blasco, 10-9, debuting in Cage Warriors. I watched a bit of him leading up to this fight just so I could familiarize myself with his style. Quite a streaky fighter, rarely saw the scorecards, hits very hard but also gets finished. And Sardari did what he usually does. He found a way to dominate the fight, to find little gaps in the opponent's defense, and then exploit those little gaps, for lack of a better term. Sardari's not a guy that's going to go in there and bolt people or just submit them with the most insane submissions. He's just a good general of the cage. Like, he knows how to win fights and he finds a way. So early on in the fight, they were trading shots, and Blasco was landing with ease and with power too. Sardari was slowing the fight down in the clinch with knees and short elbows. I think it was one of those where he knew that Jan Blasco was going to be a bit of a handful early on, so he tried to slow him down and hope to gas him out as well. Sardari's bouncing really well in this fight. I mean, he looked like he had all the confidence in the world. Knees in the clinch, short elbows, really, really nice. Just super confident Sardari. Second round, more of the same. Switching stances, in and out. Has a spinning back elbow and a right hook that, wobbles Blasco, but Blasco just shakes his head like nothing happened. And then towards the end of the second round, Sardari found his way to Blasco's back. A lot of ground and pound, a lot of rear naked choke attempts, but the bell prevented anything else from happening. I feel like an extra 30 seconds in that second round, Sardari might have submitted Jan Blasco. Third round, Sardari head kick, Blasco shakes it off again, just displaying a ridiculous chin. Obviously falls to 10-10 with that because it does go to a decision, and Sardari wins very, very comfortably, 30-27, dominant from bell to bell, practically perfect. I think he's going to be really, really happy with that performance. Obviously all fighters want to get a finish, right? But I think it's never a given, right? Especially against a guy like Jan Blasco who's got a really good chin. But I think Sardari can be proud of the performance that he put in. So this next fight for me was awesome. It's Stipe Burchik versus Jonata Silva. Just a crazy outcome for a fight. I'm a big Stipe Burchik guy. I think he's an awesome grappler. I think he's another guy who knows how to grind his way to a result. Jonata Silva, a guy I'd actually not watched much of, but I went back and watched some fights of his leading up to this fight just to see who he was really. So 7-1, fairly highly rated prospect out of Italy. Previously trained at Novo União with Andre Pederneiras, obviously, former one-time UFC title challenger, but you probably know him as the guy who coaches Jose Aldo. So, Jonata Silva was actually a 115-pound champ in Shuto, Brazil, fighting obviously here at 125 pounds. Speaking of fighting, he hadn't fought for almost 4 years. At 26 years of age, his last fight was when he was 22. How nuts is that? And what also blew my mind is that he weighed in at 122 pounds. I cannot remember for the life of me the last time a flyweight weighed so drastically under the limit in a male like flyweight fight. Obviously, there's examples with the female fights, but I most flyweights just look like they're cheating to me. Like I don't know how some of these guys are cutting weight, but to come in under the limit like 3 pounds under is pretty insane. So obviously goes to show that he's probably quite undersized for the division, but it didn't show in this fight. This was Burchik's third fight in Cage Warriors, got choked out by Sam Creasy in their title fight last year, but then came back a few months later and dominated the hell out of Aaron Abbey, which was a really, really good performance. So opening round, really good from Burchik, mixing in the stand-up and the wrestling, what you usually see from him, jab, shoot, get the takedown. Great timing on his takedowns, by the way, super fast, much faster than Jonata Silva in that first round, just beating him to everything. Silva does land a head kick on Burchik, and Burchik just, for whatever reason, is just, his head is made of stone, and he just walks through it. I think he blocks it partially with his arm, but still, like most people would probably get dropped by that. As he gets hit with it, gets the takedown. So first round, Silva, you could tell immediately, Silva definitely had the power advantage. Did land a nice roundhouse to the body that left a nasty mark on Burchik's stomach, but 10-9 after the first round for Burchik. It was close, in my opinion. Some people were actually scoring the fight in favor of Jonata Silva leading into the third round, which, fair play. I personally thought that Burchik had won the first 2 rounds, but let's talk about the second round. A lot of stance switching from Burchik, a lot of level changing. He's just such a smooth takedown artist. He just knows how to get you down, and he's always hiding it behind the jab. He's jabbing your face off, and then he's finding a way to just get you down. Silva does land 2 really nice hands in the second round, but Burchik then gets a really, really clean left hook on Silva, who wobbled a little bit towards the end of the second round. And then all hell broke loose in the third round because Burchik gets a really, really nice takedown, ducks under the shot that Jonata Silva had thrown to get that body lock takedown, and then out of nowhere, as they're standing and there's like a minute left of the fight, I think it's like a minute and 5 seconds left of the fight, Jonata Silva wobbles Burchik with this really, really nice head kick that he'd been threatening with the entire night. And, earlier I said that how the hell did Burchik's chin survive the last one? Didn't really survive this one. He wobbles him, and then it's absolutely insane as Burchik is caught between, not being conscious and also trying to survive. Jonata Silva gets one of the knockouts of the year, and one that we're going to talk about later on in the year. Gorgeous, gorgeous knee. Absolutely insane knee to knock out Stipe Burchik late into the fight. In my opinion, steals the win because I had Burchik up 2 rounds. If you thought Jonata Silva was up, fair enough. Felt like the commentary team definitely did. So maybe if you were in the BT Sports studio, maybe you had a different kind of outlook on the fight. But insane. If you haven't watched the knockout, go watch it because it was crazy. Let's keep moving along. So we had the first fight of show 2. So these Unplugged cards are often split into 2 shows. So the final fight of show 2, so the last portion. Well, I say the final fight of show 2, the first fight of show 2, but the final fight of show 2 that we're going to discuss here was Michael Chamu versus Naglia Kanisauskas. Not a crazy amount to say about this fight because it ended super early, but what do both of these 2 fighters have in common? Their last opponent was Will Curry. Both of them lost to him. Chamu, very powerful individual. If you've never seen him fight, super stocky. Never gone to a decision either as an amateur or as a pro. So that's around, I believe it was 8 or 9 fights. Naglia, obviously the more credible fighter, cleaner record, more well-rounded, really, really good grappler. He's finished all fights apart from 2 decisions, and he lost in both of those decisions. So you knew this was going to be a kill or be killed type fight. So when I saw that, I was pretty surprised because, Naglia definitely the better fighter, but Chamu is just one of those guys that if he clocks you, you're going to go to sleep. Chamu did rock Kanisauskas early, but rushes him and almost gets himself choked out. And Kanisauskas is such a slick grappler. I love watching him fight. Chamu was touching him early and with ease, cutting off the reach advantage super, super easily. He was just barreling forward, getting him up against the cage. But the award, I guess, for low fight IQ moment on this card, and I hate to rag on fighters, you guys know this, but it's the takedown from Chamu on Naglia. Why would you take down someone who's clearly a far better grappler than you are? And maybe you back your wrestling, maybe you back your top game, and you back yourself in these offensive positions. But when you've got a guy like Naglia who is slippery on the ground and he finds a way to slither and find these submissions, I don't know, man. It just blew my mind that he went for it. He did cut Naglia open with an elbow, like on the hairline, like one of those little superficial cuts that just bleeds a lot. But Kanisauskas gets Chamu in a triangle as Chamu attempts to pass his guard. Just a really awesome submission. Again, no idea why Chamu took him to the ground. Shit happens, I guess. But I really want to see more of Naglia in this 185 weight class because I think that there's probably a run in this guy. Maybe, we don't know about title credentials, but he's dangerous. And, history has shown if you can find a way to roll your way through fights, 2, 3, 4 wins in a row, and before you know it, you're in line for a title shot. Could be someone that we see in title contention one day. The main event of show 1 was Matty Byfield versus Prince McLean. Matty Byfield, really someone that a lot of people are very, very high on, and I'm not going to say that I'm not. Team Renegade guy, really, really hard hitting 205er with a good submission game, and I think that gets slept on a lot. I'm not as high on Byfield as a lot of other people are, but I think he's a brilliant fighter. Like, don't get me wrong, I think he's awesome. And I tweeted right after this fight that put Byfield in the title match, 205 pounds. There's a vacant belt that Bukauskas vacated by joining the UFC. He needs to be one half of whatever they do with that title, 100%. As I said, Byfield from Team Renegade has looked excellent in Cage Warriors. Hard hitter, nasty, nasty striking game on the ground. He's a bit of a crusher. Gets you down, he's going to pound you out or find a way to submit you. Prince McLean, 9-9, fell to 9-10 on this card. 18 fights before this card, never gone to a decision, which is pretty ludicrous, right? He was in Tough 7, which God, I can't remember who the coaches were on that match. Maybe Rampage. Yeah, I don't want to stick my neck out there. Tough 7, yeah, got eliminated before they made the final cast, so you probably wouldn't have seen him. Made his debut all the way back in 2006. So when we talk about squash matches and we talk about hazy matchmaking, this is definitely one of those. A good veteran for Byfield to fight, but a fight that you would have expected Byfield to win. Was a lot closer than you would have expected, though. You would have thought first round Prince is going to get knocked out, submitted. Byfield does manage to get that done in the second round, but it was competitive. McLean was supposed to be a warm body, but he was walking into the jabs of Byfield, also finding a way to actually trade body kicks with Byfield. There was a moment where Prince landed a couple of really, really good roundhouse kicks, but for Byfield it was the jab, over and over again. Nice chopping low kicks, more jabs. Used his reach really, really well. Just a calm and composed performance, which I guess made Prince look probably better than he is, because Prince did have some really good moments, some good strikes that definitely landed on Byfield. There was a moment where, towards the end of the round, where Byfield catches a really lazy kick from Prince McLean, straight right down the pipe, drops clean, wins the first round, does Byfield. A pretty emphatic way to end a round. Obviously, not ending the fight, but ending the round in a manner that, if you're standing over your opponent as you've dropped them or you're on top of them, it's all about psychology and fighting. So it obviously helped Byfield because in the second round, McLean went for a takedown, shoots for the guillotine. Byfield obviously scrambles out because he's a far better grappler than McLean is. Perseveres on the ground, takes McLean's back, maneuvers him over to the fence, gets the rear naked choke. The first attempt was like a face crank, which he almost got, but then found that it was at an awkward angle, corrected his position, got both his hooks in, and found the submission win. Really, really good finish from Byfield. I think he will be Cage Warriors champion at 205. I think he's probably going to mess a few more people up at 205 in Cage Warriors. The affiliation of Leon, if you want to be affiliated with Leon and Team Renegade, now's the time to do so, because the UFC's hot on this. And, Byfield, I mentioned this because Byfield's a guy I could see on the Dana White's Contender Series, for example, this coming year. So good performance from Byfield, really impressive stuff. Prince McLean probably looked good now that I'm talking about it. Probably looked good because Byfield was patient. I think if Byfield had gone there and looked to bolt him, he probably would have, and it would have looked like the squash match that it looks like on paper, right? Moving on in the card, we had Guilherme Cadena versus Matt Bonner. I loved this fight going into it because Cadena just makes me laugh. I mean, obviously lost to Darren Stewart on his debut on New Year's, and he got obliterated really. But the guy's had 51 fights in 10 years, and I think it's something like 16 or 17 of them were all in the same year. I spoke about it on one of the episodes of the pod. It's just insane the amount of fights this guy's had. He's obviously a pretty credible grappler, but at 31 and 20 or whatever he is, I think he's 31 and 21 now because Matt Bonner won. Spoilers. It's just a fight I knew Bonner was going to win. I knew Bonner was going to beat the brakes off Guilherme Cadena. But I loved the face-off, and that's what made me really excited because, press noses against each other, they're pushing each other. Guilherme Cadena, did the little cutthroat little movement with his thumb, and you just knew that Bonner was going to take that to the fucking grave of him. It was amazing. It made the matchup a lot more spicy. Obviously, Matt Bonner, if you don't know, former Cage Warriors middleweight champ, back in the win column after slumping Alan Carlos at Cage Warriors 147. Cadena to start the fight, just a straight single leg. Bonner defends it really well, good display of balance. Cadena then pulls guard, awful idea. And I tweeted about this, and I always feel this way. I get it. If you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you back your guard game, you back yourself with pulling guard, fine. But when you've got a guy who's proven to beat the shit out of people when he's on top of them, like Matt Bonner has, this dude's won titles off the back of being on top of people and beating the crap out of them. I get that that's probably your only method to victory, but you've got to find another way to do it, because the minute Cadena pulled guard, I could have turned my TV off, I could have gone to sleep, and I could have woken up knowing that Bonner had knocked him out or submitted him within that first round. And what does Bonner do the minute he gets on top of Cadena? Nasty elbows, elbow after elbow after elbow, just unleashing them over and over again. And Bonner just starts clobbering him. Yeah, I don't want to say bad things about fighters, but Cadena's definitely a guy that I don't know what he's doing in Cage Warriors personally. Pulling guard against Bonner is straight up suicidal. Don't care if you're a BJJ guy. You should have a better game plan, in my opinion. Love watching Matt Bonner win. Such a fun fighter. Just a brute of a man. Loved him doing the little cutthroat thing back to Cadena after knocking him out. And the social media stuff afterwards was brilliant because Bonner was saying that he was going to kill, Cadena was saying he was going to kill Bonner. And Bonner had some good retorts on social media. So really good to see Bonner rattling off back-to-back wins. Could we see him in the mix at 185 again? 100%. You bet. And maybe him versus Naglia. Why not? That could be a pretty fun fight. Again, a guy who's a really good jiu-jitsu guy versus a man who just wants to get on top and pound you out. So definitely, I'm not Ian Dean, I'm not the matchmaker, but it's definitely a fight that sounds interesting to me. So we'll go to the last three fights of the card, or the first three fights of the card, which were utterly bonkers. All three of them. I love them all. We'll start with the Sean Da Silva and Kiru Sahota fight. Amazing walkouts. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. Kiru Sahota walking out with the drums. It was brilliant. And really got you in the mood for that fight and told you what type of fighter Kiru Sahota is right off the bat. Kiru 9-1, debuting in Cage Warriors. Sean Da Silva 4-0, also debuting in Cage Warriors. 125 pounds, both of these men. Sean Da Silva is just certifiably bonkers. If you saw any of the footage of him leading up to the fight on Cage Warriors socials, he was just making me laugh so much. One of those fighters that just seems to enjoy being in a cage with someone else and fighting someone. Like, it's not even, you don't even feel the competitiveness. You just feel like he reminds me of like Alex Oliveira, like Cowboy Oliveira, the Brazilian one. If you know who I'm talking about, you probably do. That's who Sean Da Silva reminds me of. Like, he's got that swagger, that dancing, just seems to just enjoy every fight that he's in. Just awesome fighter, and I loved this fight so much because I thought Kiru was going to win. Familiar with Kiru from just the general UK scene. He's been putting in work for a few years. And Sean Da Silva just is mental. Starts off the fight with like a flying knee, loads of Superman punches. Hands were low for most of the fight and barely got touched, just straight up head movement with his hands down. Not so much Bobby Green as in, he's not like rolling his shoulders and putting on a great defensive boxing performance. Very much like, I've just got my hands down because this is how I want to fight and I'm just mental and I'm going to do it. So Hota's chin was insane because there was a flurry towards the end of round one where I think most fighters would have crumbled. Sahota survived. Sahota did crack him as well at the end of round one. So, Sean Da Silva definitely dominated. Sahota probably had the biggest moment by momentarily dropping Sean Da Silva in that first round. And then we get to the second round and it's just another blitz from Sean Da Silva, just flurrying, strike after strike after strike. Like, he had Kiru up against the fence so many times, and it was the uppercut and the left hook was just landing over and over and over again. Sahota just pinned against the fence. Referee had to stop the fight. Sahota got absolutely swarmed. Sean Da Silva, 125 pounds. Yes, please. I want to see more of this man. He's just straight up pure entertainment. Cannot wait to see him fight again. So next fight was Ander Sanchez versus Ryan Hewitt. Again, another fight that was really awesome. Hewitt, this was his Cage Warriors debut. Trains with Jake Hadley. Sanchez is someone who I actually think quite highly of for someone who his record was only 1-1 going into this fight. He gave Lorna Kavanagh an incredibly tough fight. Kavanagh obviously ended up pulling away towards the latter rounds, but took him to a decision. Had some really, really good moments, especially in the first round where he clips Lorna Kavanagh. Definitely go watch that fight if you haven't, because I think Ander Sanchez is definitely someone to look out for. But in this fight, Ander Sanchez looked bad. Like, I'm just going to say it straight up. Ander Sanchez looked awful. He couldn't get the takedowns. He kept going over and over and over again with the takedowns. Ryan Hewitt, good defensive fundamentals, really good underhooks, just finding a way to just stuff the takedowns. The size difference between the two of them was nuts, and Hewitt was using all of that range and all of that power to the best of his ability, really. Roundhouse to the body was killing Ander Sanchez. Halfway through the first round, I thought Sanchez's gas tank was done. I really, really thought this guy's done. And Hewitt just kept going, patient, stance switching, going to the body in the first round really did a number on Ander Sanchez. And I think my one criticism of Hewitt watching this fight was I think he was too patient in the second round. I think when you've got a guy hurt like that, and I'm always the guy who's going to say be patient if you have someone hurt. I pretty much killed Emil Brown last week over this. But with Ryan Hewitt, it just felt like Ander Sanchez was definitely fading. And I get being patient because he seems like that kind of fighter, does Hewitt. Like, he picks his shots, really good shot selection. Honestly was on his way to winning the fight. He really, really was. Sanchez didn't have much for him. But the patience from Hewitt allowed Sanchez to recover, allowed Sanchez to build back into the fight. Sanchez got his first proper takedown of the fight 7 minutes into it, got a big slam takedown off the fence. It was pretty emphatic. And then Sanchez takes his back in a really slick manner. Hewitt defends really well, in fairness to him. Sanchez just falls into side mount and, maybe some more damaging shots from Sanchez might have won him the round had it gone the distance, because with 20 seconds remaining or whatever it is, Sanchez is on the cusp of probably losing another round. And what does the man do? From half guard, just decides to drop into a leg lock and finishes the fight with this gorgeous heel hook submission. He was losing. It was insane. The confidence boost off that to win a fight that you're probably on the cusp of losing is always good. I want to see more of Ryan Hewitt in Cage Warriors, though, because even with this loss, he looked awesome to me. Very, very exciting fighter. Good shot selection. Looks like a good striker. Was good defensively in the grappling. Obviously, a heel hook's a heel hook. If you get caught, you get caught. So I want to see more of Ryan Hewitt, but that was a really good fight. All right, and lastly, we had Pav Sahota, the brother of Kiri Sahota, who we discussed from the Sean Da Silva fight, versus Sam Kelly. I can probably talk about this fight in 10 seconds because that's how long it lasted. What does Sam Kelly do when the fight starts? Rushes forward, left hook, right cross, drops Pav Sahota. Amazing stoppage from Dan Movaheady, fair play. 10-second knockout. Cage Warriors are going to tell you it's 11. Tapology has it at 11. It's a lie. It's either 9 seconds or 10 seconds, and I will preach that until the day that I die. Sam Kelly, just take a bow. Unbelievable to win a fight in that manner. Just insane. One of the fastest Cage Warriors knockouts. Just incredible to watch, really. And I can't wait to see more of him. And it's probably a knockout that we're going to talk about towards the end of the year. So we had some really, really good moments on this card all around. It was definitely a showcase night for the flyweights, though. You had obviously Ander Sanchez, heel hook submission, insane. Sean Da Silva, bonkers. Yonata Silva losing a fight and then just whipping out a head kick and a knee from nowhere with a minute left of the fight to win via knockout. Just incredible, the flyweights on this card. And I love flyweights in general. If you know me, you know 125 is probably my favorite weight class, like worldwide. Any promotion, I love the flyweight division. So seeing these guys put on a show is really, really cool. And when you've got, Sam Creasy and you've got this belt with Shadj now as well, you've got a 125 division that's worth shouting about. The best thing you can do is build around it, and that's exactly what Cage Warriors are doing right now. So all in all, another really, really successful card for Cage Warriors. Love these Unplugged shows. Amazing main event, amazing title match. Mick Stanton goes off to you. Incredible performance. Love it. The knockouts were awesome on this card. I think, it did drag towards the end of all the decisions, but the fights were so good that you barely noticed. There's not much else to say. It was an awesome card. Great main event. There's going to be so many moments that we're going to talk about towards the end of the year. At least 2 knockouts, and that main event will probably be discussed at the end of 2023. So I'm going to cut it there, guys. Really, really enjoy everyone tuning in. We reached around 100 downloads on the podcast on the last episode, which is insane. The fact that people would listen to it. Got really good feedback from the fighters as well. Jordan Vucenic, Jan Quay-Hagens, just, it's pretty humbling when the people you're talking about are also listening to your stuff. Please, guys, if you are listening to the pod, wherever you're listening to it, just leave a comment if you're on YouTube. Feedback or feedback on Twitter is also good. A review if you're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, all of that stuff. I really appreciate the feedback, and it's good to know that I'm doing a good job, hopefully. So other than that, we will talk again soon for Cage Warriors 152. We're probably going to do a preview show, and then we're also going to do a recap show, because that's going to be an awesome, awesome card in Manchester. Loads of my favorite fighters on that. You got George Hardwick defending his belt. You got Chris Bungard in the main event. Reese McEwen, who I really like. Fleminas, who I'm probably his number one fan. Cannot wait to talk about that card with you guys. But other than that, hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And thanks for listening.